Whew, great post. So I think my initial reaction to this is I agree completely with Simon, but I would even go a little farther. Today, we're taking a look at Simon Williamson's blog. So he wrote this blog on the 27th of May. It's titled, I think Anthropic and OpenAI have found product market fit. Let's first just dive into the article. Anthropic are strongly rumored to have their first profitable quarter. Stories are circulating of companies surprised at how expensive their LLM bills are becoming from usage by their staff. I think this is because OpenAI and Anthropic have both found product market fit. Enterprise customers are now paying API prices. I think they've found product market fit. Why these sudden aggressive moves on pricing? Both Anthropic and OpenAI are planning to IPO, but I suspect there's a more important factor here. I think they finally found product market fit. With the coding/general purpose agent products embodied by Claude Code, Cowork, and Codex. And they're ramping up. As further evidence that enterprise agents represent product market fit for those companies, consider their open job listing. OpenAI has 703 jobs open right now, of which I'd categorize 229, about 33%, as relating to enterprise sales and support, and count executives, go to market, forward deployed engineers, and the like. Anthropic has 390 jobs, which about 27% look enterprising. The AI failure stories around this are pretty thin. I started digging into this in response to a growing volume of stories claiming that large companies were sounding an alarm because their AI usage costs had grown so large. The most widely cited of these stories appear quite overblown to me. We also know the labs are spending a lot. The big AI labs spend billions of dollars on both training and inference. Credible figures are hard to come by, but we did get one huge hint as to the figures evolved from, oddly enough, the recent SpaceX S1. April is a new inflection point. I called November 2025 the November inflection point because that was when GPT 5.1 and Opus 4.5, combined with their respective coding agent harnesses, got good. Good enough that we spent the last 6 months adapting to agent systems that can reliably get useful work done. Whew, great post. So I think my initial reaction to this is I agree completely with Simon, but I would even go a little farther. I think the reason why coding agents have product market fit is because of the terminal. The terminal gives coding agents everything that they need to get their job done. And that's why software engineers have loved coding agents so much. The problem is if we go to someone who's, for example, working in sales, the terminal is not A, somewhere they're comfortable, and B, somewhere that has access to what they need. So let's say, for example, I need to compare Salesforce to, or I just need to go in Salesforce and find any kind of information. The terminal wasn't made for that. How do I connect to the terminal? How do I create an agent that can go to Salesforce and do the things that I would manually do? We haven't answered that question yet, but we were able to answer that question for the terminal for coders, right? What do coders do? They go to GitHub and they pull docs. All of these things we figured out how to do in the terminal. And that's why I think Arcade is in such an exciting spot, is because we are thinking about, hey, in the terminal, how are people going to use AI? But going past just the coding agent, right? There's all of these different jobs that could take advantage of AI, right? But they're simply not, because the terminal is not the place for that to work. But now that we've kind of found product market fit for coding agents, the next thing I think we're going to see is other roles typical in white collar that are high compensation, finding ways to use AI to improve their work. And one thing I think is really important to note here is, by the way, you need a whole lot of humans in the mix to make this work. We're not saying get rid of the humans. We're saying give the humans AI so that they can do a better job. So I'm going to write a blog post in response to this, where the thesis is basically, I agree completely with everything Simon says, but I think he's missing one thing, which is the terminal was the place for the coding agent. And now that we're moving outside of just software engineers and the sales, marketing, et cetera, we need to start thinking about how are we going to connect things like Salesforce, Figma, et cetera, to AI. And MCPs are going to be the bet that I'm making, right? Because if you give your agent access to an MCP, they have access to the tools. With something like Arcade, we can do the governance. And I think that's what you're going to start to see, is that the same way that coding agents or people who work in code are pretty savvy with these agents and figured out how to prompt them, et cetera, you're going to start to see that move outside of just software engineering, which obviously is going to make the AI market a lot bigger. Welcome to Touchdown. with AI with Thierry Damiba. I'm a developer evangelist at Arcade. If you're watching this, then you probably just finished watching me read the Simon Willison blog where he talks about how Anthropic and OpenAI have found product market fit. Before I actually get into this reaction, I want to talk first about Simon Willison. He is a great person. When I was actually looking for a gig maybe 2.5 years ago, I met with him and I'm sorry, Simon, I flaked on you. And I've been trying to get back in touch with him, but I haven't been able to hear him. Why? Because I think, Simon, that you need to 100% be teaching people. I know you don't want to do it, but you know way too much to not be teaching some kind of course. Let's collab on an MCP course, Simon. Come on. With that said, you probably just watched me read Simon's blog and give my short reaction, but I want to talk a little more in detail about basically what I think is going to happen here, right? So I believe that the terminal is the reason that coding agents were what the labs found product market fit in first, because engineers have been thinking very deeply for decades, at the very minimum, one might argue even centuries, about how do multiple people work on this one thing? A, how do we know who's working on it? B, how do we know what they actually changed? And C, how do we scope out different scope for people? And then there's also a D, which is how do we resolve conflicts? So when agents were involved, all we had to do was just figure out how to connect the person to the agent, which is basically an identity problem. And identity services have been around for a long time. There's great ones. Arcade has user sources. We love our identity providers. But when we move to sales, when we move to marketing, when we move to design, these systems simply have not been in place. And that's why you see things like Arcade becoming so popular, right? Is because now all of a sudden the sales engineer, the AE, the marketing person, the admin assistant, the executive assistant, the person who cleans the toilet, everyone can get advantage of AI, right? But to get advantage of AI, you need to let it access some spicy and sensitive documents. How do you do that? Well, governance, right? That's where Arcade comes in, is this idea of who is the person, who is the agent, what resources do they have access to, and what action do they take? And I think when you put those four together, is going to unlock other disciplines in the same way that software engineering was unlocked with the terminal, right? So to come back to the beginning, I mentioned that I think software engineering is where Anthropic and OpenAI hit that product market fit because of the terminal, right? The terminal is basically the perfect dream. If terminals didn't exist before agents and someone said, hey, I'm coming out with a terminal, people would be like, oh my God, no way. Business people would be like, cool, how does that help me connect to Salesforce and update things after I have a call without having to spend all this time clicking around your dashboard or telling my agent or whatever, right? How can it just know? There's different requirements. They collaborate in different ways. They have different incentives. And the systems that the software engineers have set up at best are just basically like, hey, click around on some website. Now we're seeing the proliferation of things like Claude Cowork and other agentic tools that are targeted towards these people, but these tools still are super clunky, right? If you want to use your email to update something in Salesforce and then send someone a Slack message and take other actions, right? The agentic systems just haven't really been there. So everyone's trying to figure out, hey, how do we govern the layer? And then B, how do we get ROI from this investment that we're putting in AI, right? The story of the company that spent, I think it was $500 million on AI. Whatever that number was, there's going to be some heads that are rolling. And of course, any good manager will always have a good neck guard up. And right now, that's going to be knowing what people are actually doing with AI. So you also have that factor playing in as well. But I say all that to say, once again, I agree 100% with everything that Simon said, but I will add in that I don't think the product market fit is just software engineers. I think this is going to spread to other disciplines. It's just right now, the terminal combined with the fact that software engineers have been spending a long time thinking about how these questions of governance work in their digital work, no pun intended, has given them a massive head start, right? And of course, also the fact that the people that are working on these agents tend to be software engineers. So there's that happening as well. But I think it's pretty clear now that everyone can find value from AI. It doesn't really matter who you are or what you're doing. There's some kind of value you could be getting. So I'm super excited for what's going to happen the rest of the year. I'm super excited for 2027, right? Remember that Claude Code, Codex, they were not around 2 years ago, right? Even these chatbots 5 years ago, they weren't around. This is brave new world. We're getting to experience it live. Lock in, monitor the situation, and definitely let me know what you think about this video. My name is Thierry Damiba. This is Touchdown with AI. TDAI with TD, baby. We just scored. I am a developer evangelist at Arcade. Get your MCPs going, governance off, optimized tools, baby. I'll talk to you guys later.